Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Frankie W and welcome back to my life. So for this week's video, I wanted to do a March, April, and May reading wrap up. May is not over yet and there's definitely room for the stats to change. I could finish a book in the next couple of days, but I wanted to start this video by doing a haul because I haven't been home since January, which means I haven't been able to get my pre-orders. But I will say, shockingly enough, one of my pre-orders came days after it was supposed to. But anyway, I pre-ordered Suzanne Collins' Sunrise on the Reaping and Zoe Hanamakuda's The Coven Tendency. These are books that are going on my summer my summer TBR, but also just on my reading list for this year. But I thought I'd show those books and add them to my bookshelf, as well as adding all the other books I read to my bookshelf. And this is my next read. I'm so excited. The craziest thing is I've truly avoided book spoilers for months. 4 months. I think a couple book spoilers or a couple book snippets have been sneaking by with the casting announcements, which by the time this video comes out, the entire cast has been announced. Crazy lineup. I'm so excited, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So this would actually go in between The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and The Hunger Games as a prequel type book. So I think that's where I'll put it in the stack, just to see what it looks like. Okay, so we're gonna start with March. For March, both books that I read were actually audiobooks. So I'm pulling up my stats on the Storygraph. So in March, I read 2 books, 44 pages, and 7.95 hours of listening. It took me an average of 12 days to finish my books. My top 4 moods were reflective, emotional, sad, and then dark, with both books being reflective, both books being emotional, one book being sad, and the other book being dark. Or actually both of them. One of the books I read was fast-paced, while the other one was medium-paced. They were both audiobooks under 8 hours. They were both nonfiction, and the top genres of these books were memoir, poetry, and autobiography. They were both memoirs, but one was poetry and the other was autobiography. That was the stats, and now talking about the actual books I read Shari Franke's The House of My Mother, A Daughter's Quest for Freedom, and it's written by Shari Franke, and the book is narrated by Shari Franke, and I would also say that it is talked about that she had a ghostwriter also write this book with her, but I have now kind of learned more about ghostwriters and what that actually means for storytelling, and how sometimes people have the ideas and the concepts and the thoughts, but aren't able to make them into a cohesive story. So I think that's really interesting. I think they call their ghostwriter their partner or their writing companion. And it's just really interesting to see how this story is depicted, because, you know, it's like through her truest experience, but it's also with the help of someone who's able to articulate her thoughts in a certain way. I found this book sad and disheartening and at times really hard to read, because it's such a relevant story, because even today we have all these comments and think pieces that are going up about how child stars and specifically child influencers who don't have the same like protective laws around them. And even with protective laws, like if you're in my generation, you kind of know what happened to like Billy Younger, whose father kind of took all the money from him doing lab rats. So there are ways that parents are able to get around these laws and still rob their children, but it's the fact that there are no laws in place for influencers. And now we're finally having that generation of children that are like my age kind of come up and be like, I was a child influencer and this is how this affected me, and this is why I don't feel comfortable with other kids being child influencers, or why I didn't get to consent, or like just all those types of things. And basically, if you don't know who Shari Franke is or Ruby Franke, I kind of talk about it in my reading vlog that I did when I read for 24 hours. I read a lot of this book in that video, but Ruby Franke was the mom in this family channel called 8 Passengers, and it's called 8 Passengers because it was a mom and a dad and their 6 children, Shari Franke being the oldest daughter, and then I cannot remember her brother's name, but he's the oldest son. We do not know any of the other names except for the mom, the dad, and the oldest siblings, because the younger ones were underage, and Shari never shares their names for respect of their privacy, and if later on the children want to come forward and speak their truth, they have the ability to do that. But if not, like, they're kind of now in a private, they finally have privacy is what I'm trying to say. But I think that it's a really sad story, and you get to see how fair the parents were to their children. And also you kind of learn how kind of cultish Mormon family vloggers are, because there's a lot of them in existence, which I also didn't know. But I also, like, it's a really interesting story. I think it gave me a lot of reminders of Educated by Tara Westover, and I don't know, I enjoyed the book a lot. I think it gave a lot of new perspective. I think that she was very easy on her father when he was perpetuating a lot of the same harm to her as her mother, but he was like the lesser of two evils, you know? And I think in a way, because his abuse was less severe, she was more willing to forgive him because their mom is in jail. And if she didn't forgive her father, it's like, who would take care of her siblings? So I do understand that. And I don't want to make comments on her life and her experiences. I just would say that if I was in the position she was, I don't think I would have forgiven her father either. I think I would have taken my siblings and run, but I haven't lived that experience, and I don't know how I would react if it actually happened, you know? Like, I don't, like, she's younger than me. She doesn't have the resources to take on 6 or 5 to 4 of her siblings. And I really wanted to watch the Hulu documentary that was created by this, but a lot of people were saying that the eldest brother who is in the documentary, it still seems he's a little brainwashed, and the father is taking no accountability and none of the blame. He's blaming his wife on all of this, and it's like, yes. When, what is her name? It's Ruby, Frankie, and the woman who indoctrinated her into a cult. I'm so sorry, like, names are escaping me. I read this book and I knew about this information so long ago. But the two of them, yes, they had a cult, and they were more severe in the abuse that they were perpetuating against their children. But the mom and dad were already doing that to their kids before then. Like, there was the whole instance, like, the oldest son, I only knew this story so well because it was, like, on a bunch of drama channels. For, like, 8 to 6 months, I can't remember, the oldest son had been sleeping on a beanbag instead of his room because he lost his bedroom privileges. Bedroom privileges. Like, those are the types of things that just wrench at your heart, that there are people who, like, think of their children like that, you know what I mean? And they get sent to these camps that treat them horribly, and yeah. Or there was this one instance where the 2 youngest siblings were becoming ungrateful, so they didn't get anything for Christmas, and they made the kids watch as everyone else opened gifts for Christmas and didn't get them anything. Like, you guys are it was all really wild to read about. It was so much. It was very unexpected. So there's that. And then I actually haven't added a star rating to it because I wasn't sure how I felt. I feel like it's a really good book. It's a really good read, but at the same time, it happened so close to the incident. Like, the book was released very quickly after the incident, and I think that's so Shari can now live a very private life and not be on the internet, and I love that for her. But I do think that some of her opinions and some of her perspectives on things might shift in a couple years. So it's in a way, I didn't want to give a premature rating to a book that was released semi-prematurely, and that's not an insult to the story at all. I just think the longer you sit with it, the longer you realize that there might be more things that she isn't thinking about. Because as of right now, she's still, like, I'm a religious person, but right now she's still religious despite how she was treated within her church as a Mormon. And I think that a lot of things within the Mormon community are kind of targeted towards women. I think there were like parts started to think about. Like, there were ideas of her opinion started, but the full idea wasn't formed yet because she hasn't had enough time to sit with them yet. But anyway, I haven't rated it yet, but I'd probably give it like a 4. I really liked the book though. And then the other book I read, it was a book of poems, and I don't even know how to... It was Autopsy of an Ex-Teen Heartthrob by Avan Jogia. Avan Jogia, if you didn't know, was the one of 3 male leads on Victorious. It was him, I literally forgot the other guy's name, and Leon Thomas, the one that DJs. Oh my god. But there are 3, and Avan Jogia and Leon Thomas were the 2 brown characters, I guess, but I think a lot of times they tried to just use back as like Canadian and they never talked about him being brown. But anyway, Avan Jogia's Autopsy of an Ex-Teen Heartthrob is very interesting because I still don't know how I fully feel about it, right? It's a book of poetry, but I do want to say, as someone who is an English minor in college, it's new age poetry in the way that it's very much like Rupi Kaur's Milk and Honey. It's a lot of sentences broken up. It's a lot of stream of consciousness thoughts. And I think that was the only way he felt comfortable sharing some of his ideas. I think listening to the audiobook versus reading the book, hearing him speak, his diction, and the way his intent behind his words was really important to me. And it made me like it more. I will say that I am someone who listens to the Celebrity Memoir Book Club, and this is a comment I don't know when I made that. I don't even know if it ended up in a video, but the Celebrity Memoir Book Club is a duo of millennial white women. So first of all, they don't know who Avan Jogia is, and second of all, he has no significance to him. So I think because a lot of the people who watch Victorious and a lot of the people of color who are fans of him know that during that time he was just like put front and center as being the attractive person. So kind of his own feelings towards that, I will never know what it's like to be on a kids TV show where you're hyper focused on as being the like very attractive person, and that everyone comes up to you and always is like, oh, you're the very attractive person that was in that TV show. Like, I'll never know that. But at the same time, it's a really interesting book because he's very, I don't want to say, it feels like he's a little cynical with life is what I'll say. And it's really interesting when you're reading it because he talks a lot about hating California. He talks a lot about fake people. He talks a lot about acting is not always about substance in a way, and like he stopped acting because he was like, I'm not contributing to art, like I'm useless, which is interesting because I liked him in Twisted. Like, I like Twisted. And I do think something also really interesting is I knew he was in a relationship with Halsey. I feel like a lot of people found out he was in a relationship with Halsey recently, I guess. I've known kind of since like before Monkey Man, when they like went, I think Monkey Man was their first public appearance, but before then they've definitely like talked. I think I'm very chronically online if that's not true, but I definitely feel like I knew about them before Monkey Man. But anyway, what I was going to say is he does something where I'm pretty sure the book is dedicated to Halsey, and then there's a chapter that's about, or there's a poem that's about Halsey and how she's so kind and how she remembers all of her fans' names and how she's just such a good person and the world doesn't deserve her and neither does he. And like I can kind of see how some of the poems in the beginning were more cynical before he met Halsey. And then he talks about LA sucking, he wishes LA would burn in a fire, which like, wow, timing is crazy because then it did. Intention, y'all. Never speak things into existence if you mean harm. And then I guess the next thing is like he kind of falls in love with Halsey and his poems about her, but then there's like some that are mixed in that are not, that could be from either side of the timeline. And he ends with the Victorious poem, which is like, a lot of you only came here because he wanted to hear my experiences on Victorious. And I've read Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died, and I know her own experiences of being an actress in the industry. And if Avan Jogia just saying, like, he's drunk all the time and he doesn't even remember what they're shooting, or he's hungover and he keeps saying Kesha's name wrong, like, I don't know. It was very interesting. I'm not going to be as harsh on it as the Celebrity Memoir Book Club, but I also do think that, like, there is a significance in him being a brown poet talking about kind of these, like, in a way insignificant things, but also significant to him. You know, I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about this one, and I still don't know how I would rate it. I think as a critical person who was an English minor, took poetry classes, I wouldn't rate this book high. But I think as someone who was a fan of him and who thinks that everyone deserves a chance to tell their story, everyone within reason. I don't want to read a memoir from certain people. I'm going to say that right now. But I do think that people are kind of being like, you're the least famous person that came out from Victorious. What do you have to say? And I don't think that's fair. I think that his experiences moving to LA kind of by himself at 18, like, okay, people move out younger than that. I went to boarding school at 13. I was basically by myself in a way at a younger age. But it's like his own experience that he moved to California at 18. 18 in California, working at Nickelodeon, and he, like, talks about this inappropriate relationship he had with an older woman, and Dan Schneider, he does mention him at one point, like, even though, again, he kind of alludes to him and doesn't say him by name. But it's like, him being alone at 18 in California, like, I genuinely couldn't imagine it. And I think people kind of diminish it because he's 18, but it's like, 18 isn't an adult. 18 isn't an adult, and we shouldn't be treating it like it is, you know? And yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it. But I did, Katrina's so sweet. We literally ran to the poetry stage so I could hear him during the LA Times Festival of Books. Heard him recite some of his poetry. His tent was literally full of people listening to him. And again, it was mainly brown people, which I do, like, I don't know what the significance of that is, but, like, you know, for so many times, like, white mediocrity succeeds where only brown excellence succeeds. So I do think there's something in, like, him writing this poetry book that's not groundbreaking or, like, new form, but still very interesting and still very appeasing. Like, I don't think everything brown people create have to be excellent, and it could just be good. It could just be okay. And again, I don't really know how I feel about this. I'm not calling this not excellent, but I'm also, I don't know where I'm going with this. I still don't know how I feel about this book, but hearing him talk and hearing him read, you can tell that writing means something to him, and I think that's part of it. I think that's where the significance starts, you know, because this means something to him, and that's all that really matters. And I think people who have problems with that just don't get it, man. I don't know. And those were the two books I read in March. I feel like I talked for a very long time, so I'm sorry about that. April, I read pages, but I did not complete any books. And in May, I finished one book, read 326 pages. On average, it took me a month to finish this book, and it was both inspiring and emotional with medium pace. It was a 300 to 499 page book. It was fiction. It was literary fiction and contemporary. The genres were literary and contemporary, and it was a 169-page print book. And I gave it a 5.0. And I do want to talk about a meme I put on my story yesterday. It says how much I read in, and then it's like the first part of it is saying like 3 months. Oh, if it'll focus. Hello? I'll put it on the screen. But basically it's saying that the first half of the book they read, it took 3 months to read, and the second half of the book they read, it took literally 1 day, and that is what happened to me with this book. Genuinely, I went from reading none of it to reading all of it in the span of 2 days. Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I feel like when people talk about Carrie Soto is Back or Taylor Jenkins Reid, they usually talk about Daisy Jones and the Six, or they talk about just like this being a tennis book. No one told me Carrie Soto was going to be a Latina, and I loved that. I loved that Spanish was kind of just incorporated into it, and her dad and her just like spoke in Spanish, and like for the longer sentences there were translations, but for the other stuff there wasn't. So if you didn't know Spanish, girl, look it up. Like, and nobody talks about that, and it kind of like was annoying that I didn't know this was going to be like a woman of color as the main character. And her manager slash boss is a black woman, so it's really interesting to have these two women. Her father's a Latino, and then the male lead in this book, I'm gonna just assume, is white. So it's really interesting to have different perspectives in this book. And Taylor Jenkins Reid does a really interesting thing where she nods to her own book, which is Daisy Jones and the Six, because Daisy Jones and the Six is real in this universe, but Daisy Jones and the Six is not an actual real band. There's so much I could say about this book, and I don't know how much I can say without spoiling it, because genuinely, every time I picked this book up, I wanted to cry, and not in a bad way. It just like, she felt like such a real person, and so when she was hurting, I was hurting, but also like, I hated how the media treated her. When she felt a loss, I felt it for her. Like, she was just such a great female character, and I think having a strong and independent female character, like the whole girl boss thing, is so not new, but I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid does it in a really interesting way, where a woman of so much strength is judged and mistreated, and in a way kind of played as a weakness. Like, her strength is seen as a weakness, or seen as like discontent for some people, because Carrie Soto is someone who is unapologetic. They call her the battle axe. She never smiles, and it shows like in a way how generational trauma can affect someone, and like in a way the decisions of her father, what they mean for her, or her father kind of changing but her kind of staying the same. Oh my god, there was something that happened in this book that I was not expecting. Made me sad, bro. Made me sad. Sobbing reading this book. But I loved this book, and it didn't end like I thought it was gonna end. I think you go in assuming one thing. It did not end how I expected it to end. And I don't want to call out the chapter name because I think it's kind of a spoiler, but like the last chapter of this book before the acknowledgements, what a great like time jump. Like, I never expected to like a time jump. Sometimes I hate time jumps. I'll say the icebreaker time jump, hate it. This time jump I really appreciated, and I think it also played into the strengths of the book and made the book more interesting. So there's that. But yeah, anyway, as I said, I gave this book 5 stars. My synopsis for this book, without spoiling it, is that Carrie Soto is a tennis player who went into retirement because of an injury, and she only comes out of retirement when a new, young, and spry tennis player comes for her record. So Carrie Soto originally had the most Grand Slams ever, I think, and there was this new, young tennis player who was about to tie with her. And then if she didn't tie with her, then she was going to beat her. And basically, Carrie Soto is kind of like, that's not happening. Not on my watch. And so she came out of retirement specifically just to beat her. And then you also see like the ageism and sexism in sports. Obviously, that's never going away. But Taylor Jenkins Reid, not never going away, but not going away anytime soon, I mean. But Taylor Jenkins Reid does something really interesting where some chapters are literally like time periods versus like some are op-eds and some are magazine transcripts. Some are transcripts from a sports show. Those kind of piss me off because it's 2 guys and a woman, and the woman's very like, I don't know what the word, docile, sometimes. So they'll literally be like, oh, well, you have to agree that Carrie Soto's a bitch. And she's like, I don't think I agree with that. And they're like, well, anyway. And it's like, oh, A newscaster literally called her a bitch on live air. Again, this is a fake book, but a newscaster called her a bitch on live TV. That was crazy, guys. Crazy, crazy, crazy. And again, not real, but the way that I was offended for her. Oh, we read at dawn for Miss Carrie Soto. What? I would definitely be someone in the stands, like, cheering her on. This reminds me, I don't know her name. I couldn't tell it to you, but there's this girl on YouTube who's dating a tennis player, and I guess she makes content for Wimbledon or something. I've watched a bunch of her vlogs, like, watching her boyfriend play tennis and her getting to make tennis content on, like, the US Open's YouTube channel or something. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. And there was that, and there was challengers, and of course, like, Coco, Venus, Serena, and Naomi are, like, reasons why I'm into tennis, but I feel like I never pay attention to tennis outside of Coco, Venus, Serena, and Naomi. But that YouTuber that I was talking about made me, like, kind of want to get back into tennis. Cassidy was asking if people wanted to play tennis with her on the weekends, and I was like, oh. I mean, I haven't played since I was, like, a child, but I'd kind of be down. And then I read this book, and I was like, tennis is coming back in my life. It's part of the mainstream, not, like, challengers. Like, tennis is mainstream. This was my reading wrap-up. I read 3 books. 2 audiobooks, 1 physical book. I think I'm 10 books down out of my 25 book goal. Slow and steady wins the race and all that. Like, I'll catch up. I actually don't. If I'm behind, I don't really know. I think I'm supposed to read, if last year was 24 and it was 2 a month, and we're in May, I should read 10. Yeah, I might be like 1 book behind, but I'm chilling. Thanks so much for watching this video. I will see you guys for another video very soon.